welcome back to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. I promised we would be answering listener questions when you returned, and we are. What is a little different today is that instead of bouncing back and forth between finance and admissions, we're just really gonna talk about admissions. We have a lot of questions we haven't been able to get to. So Shannon Vasconcelos is joining me today. Lovely Shannon, who has great insight into all things finance. And all she's really going to do today is read some questions. But for those of you who are wondering about her background, she's a former financial aid officer at both BU and Tufts. Hi, Shannon.
Hi, Beth, and I will use none of that background today. You will get none of my fantastic insight. I'm sure that the listeners are very upset about that, but they will survive.
They should be.
Alrighty, so I have the first question for you is from Lola that she submitted through our Facebook page. So folks, feel free to do that. If you do have questions for us, just send us a message on Facebook and we will try to get to as many as we can. And Lola's question is about world language. And she says, my son is a rising senior. He took both Latin and French in middle school, so he could choose either one in high school. He went for Latin in 9th grade, but for 10th grade, he had to change to French due to a scheduling conflict. And he took AP French in 11th. He has fulfilled the graduation requirement with 1 year of Latin and 2 years of French. However, if his goal is a highly selective college, and I think that's probably key, should he continue to take Latin or a new language in 12th grade so that he has 4 years of world language? Is taking 4 years of world language really important? He likes languages, but STEM is more of his interest, and he would like to spend more time on those subjects in 12th grade. Thank you for your help. As always, love the podcast.
Well, thank you for the support of the podcast. We appreciate that. This is a little bit tricky, right? So what stands out for me about this is that there were a lot of things that I probably would have done differently. However, the student in question took AP French this year. And in general, when you're looking at the most selective levels, our advice is that you stick with all 5 major subjects all 4 years and that you go to the highest level available in each of those 5 subject areas. So math, science, English, history, and foreign language. So if all he had this year was French 3 or French 4, and next year would be the AP level French, I would say you stick with the French and you take the AP French next year. However, because he's taken AP French, it does open things up a little bit. So it's in this situation, it's less about having the 4 years in the foreign language and more about the level that you've achieved in that foreign language. So for a lot of students, you take a foreign language in middle school, and then you start at sort of the second level when you get to high school, right? So my son started in French in middle school. He took 2 years of French, and then when he got to high school, he started in French 2. So they kind of spread it out a little bit. What it sounds like is either that your son is really strong in the foreign language, or that they covered more ground in middle school than most students do, and therefore he was able to start at a higher level. So my advice in this specific situation would be focus less on, he doesn't have the 4 years in a language, and more on the fact that he achieved the AP level. And so in senior year, if there is an additional level in French beyond the AP level, I would take that. If he has maxed out the French offerings at the school, what he might look to do in this situation then would be to double up in another area. So if he loves math and science, maybe he does 2 higher level sciences, or he does 2 higher level math classes next year. So those are also opportunities for him. If there really isn't anything curriculum-wise that he can take and double up in another area, then I would say maybe do another year of Latin. I don't personally think it makes sense to add a 3rd language into the mix. That becomes more of just like an also-ran. It's not going to be a particularly high-level course. So at least he can show growth in the Latin area. But if he's maxed out the French curriculum and he can double up in another area, then that is probably what I would do in this specific situation.
Perfect. And if he hadn't maxed out the French, if he hadn't taken AP yet, the advice would be to stick with French.
That's exactly
correct?
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Gotcha. All right. Our next question is about teacher recommendations, and this comes from Jonathan. Who should write the 2 recommendations that you might need to get for your college application? Is it the 2 who would write the strongest recommendations, or is it crucial to have one from humanities and one from math and science for balance?
Right. So this is one of those things that seems to persist as, in my opinion, a myth. When I worked at Penn and when I traveled with my colleagues from Harvard and from Georgetown and from Duke, we all stress the same thing, which is your recommendation letters should come from those teachers who know you best and can write you a positive letter of recommendation. Doesn't mean it's the class that you got the A in necessarily, and it certainly doesn't mean that it needs to be this arbitrary one from the humanities and one from math or science. That seems to just be a recurring thing. Now, might a school specify that? Absolutely. And in which case, if you are applying to a school where they have actively specified, we want one from the humanities and we want one from math and science, well then, there's your answer. But in general, the recommendation letters, the important thing is that they be good. That's really your primary goal. A couple of things I would stay away from. You don't want to get 2 recommendation letters in the same subject area. That is generally not great, right? So 2 math teachers writing for you, or 2 science teachers writing for you, or 2 English teachers writing for you. But if you have an English teacher and a history teacher, fine, totally fine. If you have a math teacher and a science teacher, also totally fine. If you happen to have a great relationship with someone in the humanities and someone in the STEM fields, awesome. Then, you can show a little bit, maybe more breadth, but there is nothing to be gained by getting a kind of run-of-the-mill or lukewarm recommendation letter and under the false pretense that, well, but I have one from the humanities and I have one from the math and science. So always go for the best letters. That is my best advice.
Perfect. And I think with a lot of these rumors, there tends to be like a little grain of
Yes.
truth. And so like the advice not to get 2 English teachers, but then that gets blown out of proportion, expanded, don't get 2 from humanities. That's what tends to happen with these rumors.
And actually, one thing that I probably should point out is if you're applying to engineering and your 2 recs come from humanities, it's a little questionable, right? Because they're looking to better understand your choices and they want to understand your abilities in the areas that you want to study. So if you're going to select a particular area to study in, ideally your recommendation will support your ability to study in that area. So it may be something to think about if the only good letters you're going to get are going to come from, or the best letters are going to come from the humanities side, and you are doing STEM. I don't know, unless if you're not applying to a specific program like engineering, if you're just applying and you're going to be a science major, maybe you just don't want to select that on your application. Maybe you just go in as undecided rather than introduce a question. Well, she wants to major in chem, and yet the recommendations are from an English teacher and a history teacher. You've created a disconnect there. So remember that when you select a major on your application, all you're telling the school is, I think I might major in this. You are not actually selecting your major. You do that when you get to college. And at most colleges, you're going to have a couple of years before you need to select that major. So, of course, if you're applying to a specialized program like engineering or nursing or something else where you are required to apply as an entering freshman, and now you might have a little bit of a conundrum because your best letters might not be coming from those areas. And so that's something to think about. But otherwise, be thoughtful about how it's going to appear on the college side when you make these choices.
Right. You want that application to tell that consistent story.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
The next question comes from Laura. She says, good morning. I have seen 2 new questions added to the Common App, one for students and one for counselors. I know the student prompt is optional, but what are your thoughts about how students should use this prompt? It seems to lean towards students who have had a major shift, disruption, loss, setback during COVID. I think she quoted right from the question there. Yep. Do you think that students who have not had any of these major negative shifts, can still use the prompt to talk about how they have spent this stay-at-home time, what they have learned and discovered about themselves or their family or their community, any new interests they've developed. And actually, I should just point out that we have a blog post. As of this taping, the blog post is not out yet, but it is due to come out before this episode airs. So for added insight beyond what Beth is about to say, make sure that you do check out our blog. I'm sure she's going to cover everything, but just in case, check out the blog, which is at blog.getintocollege.com. And I think it will have come out on May 29th. But now Beth can actually answer the question.
Sure, no pressure.
Right.
I think for starters, let's all acknowledge that this is new territory. There's always been a section on the Common Application for additional information. And there has always been angst about, what do I put in there if I have nothing to say? And my rule of thumb, and I feel very strongly about this, having read thousands of applications, if you have nothing to say in that area, do not put anything in that section. There is no harm in leaving it if you don't have anything, and this is the additional information section. And I feel similarly about this new COVID-19 question. If you discovered a brand new interest, if you did learn something about yourself, if you did have some kind of something important happen, by all means, answer that question. Right. If you are racking your brain, if you are making things up, if you just don't really have anything to say, but you just don't want to leave it blank, please leave it blank. The things that we see students create when they really have nothing to say are not helpful and generally are going to detract. So if you want the person reading your application, if you are saying to them, I have something to share that I think is really valuable, it better be. If you ask them to read it, because they are literally going to read thousands and thousands of applications. And so it sounds like I'm almost saying don't write anything unless you have something serious. And I'm not actually saying that. What I'm saying is, certainly there will be students who do have something that they learned or some new, if I was going to sit down and write an application today, I would say that I developed 2 new skills during COVID-19. I became a bread baker, which is something I'd always wanted to do and never made time for. And now I'm doing that and I really enjoy it. And so I might share like what I enjoy about it. I think it's valid and new information about me. And then I have some other thing that I'm about to try where I'm going to deep clean all of my laundry. I don't know if you guys have seen that going around on Instagram or Facebook, but I'll report back on that. I don't know if that's something that's going to be so impactful that it would make this essay for me. But the point is that I actually have something that immediately comes to mind that I think would be great here. If you really don't, if this was really just business as usual, you had school, there wasn't anything that was super exciting or different or unique about it, if you really actually didn't have time to develop any new interests, if for you it was awesome because it basically gave you a little bit more time to sit at home and read and you enjoy doing that, I don't know that these are things that warrant an actual extra essay. So I would proceed with the idea that if you truly really don't have anything to add there, then leave it blank. It won't count against you if you leave it blank. If you add something and it's not that good or it doesn't really add anything, is it going to hurt you? Probably not. College admissions officers are aware that there is a fear of leaving things blank, but it won't necessarily get you anything. And for that reason, I would say don't try to create something just because there's this new question. I'm interested to read the blog. I want to see what the blog writer has to say. There are no hard and fast rules about this stuff. Yeah. There are a lot of opinions, but I do feel pretty strongly if you don't have anything all that special to say, then I would just leave it blank. It's there for you to take advantage of, not for you to have to do something in that section.
Absolutely.
All right, we are going to take a really quick break. We have, I know, many more questions to get to. And so when we come back, we're going to get to those.